Our story begins on a familiar site, the throne room of Team Plasma's castle. The 7 sages and Shadow Triad are assembled as Ghetsis approaches the king's raised dais. Perched on the throne is a young man, and at his side are his adoptive sisters, Anthea and Concordia. Ghetsis climbs the stairs to the throne, and when he reaches the top, he lays the crown upon the young king's ebony hair with a cry of, "All hail Lord A, Team Plasma's new king." Yes, not N, but A for Ash. In this timeline, Ghetsis took a very different boy under his wing, and this is the story of how that choice will change the Unova region and the world itself. The young king surveys his attendants before rising to his feet and making his first kingly declaration. He tells them to go forth and liberate all Pokemon. He says that Team Plasma will free the Unova region. All in attendance cry their support for the king, save for one man, Ghetsis. He stands behind the throne and allows himself a smirk for how spectacularly his plan has fallen into place. Later in the throne room, when all have left except A, Anthea, and Concordia, Ghetsis is called in by the king. A tells his father that now that he is king, he is done living in isolation while Pokemon suffer. He is going to travel through the region and lead the liberation effort himself. This annoys Ghetsis, who doesn't like that his puppet is thinking for itself. But it is not an unexpected decision, considering what a passionate boy A has always been. So he plays the caring father and loyal advisor, agreeing that his king is wise, and saying he would expect nothing less from the hero of ideals. He does, however, request that A at least let him assign someone to accompany the young king, for his own protection. A cuts him off, saying he can, but they cannot be from the Shadow Triad, since there is something about them that doesn't sit right with A. Nor will he allow Ghetsis' bodyguard, the enigmatic green-haired man known as Nat, to come with him. This further irks Ghetsis, since Nat would be the most ideal candidate to spy on the boy. But no matter, he'll just have the Shadow Triad tail A from a distance. Bowing, Ghetsis obliges his king's command, and goes with his backup choice. He informs A of a young researcher named Colrus, and lays on the flattery, suggesting he could learn a lot about Team Plasma's ideals by travelling with their king. A accepts this choice, and informs Ghetsis that Anthea and Concordia will be coming as well, which is the first bit of good news the green-haired sage has heard all day. Though he can't count on the girls to spy for him, he does know they are devoted to A, and will at least keep him safe from harm until the time comes to enact the final plan. Ghetsis bids his adoptive children farewell, and has a cross-transceiver brought out for each of them, calling it a parting gift. Playing the role of doting father once more, he expresses how much he will miss them, and the hope that they will call home occasionally. The trio of A, Anthea, and Concordia then prepare to set off. Ghetsis offers to have one of their helicopters fly them to Icera's city, where Colrus is located, but A refuses, citing that they can't witness the oppression of Pokemon from the sky. Ghetsis nods his approval, then departs to inform Colrus of his new orders. Passing through the halls of the castle, the trio enter A's playroom, which is filled with Pokemon. The Pokemon perk up at the sight of them and run to receive hugs and pats. A explains that the 3 of them are going on a journey to liberate Pokemon, who were abused like all the Pokemon here. He acknowledges that it would be great to have them travel with him, but he can't ask them to go back into the world that hurt them just for his sake. Most of the Pokemon seem frightened by this prospect, but they also remember A's friendship and so crowd him, each offering to be his companion. A hugs them all, but sticks firm to his decision that he won't be bringing any of them. Anthea and Concordia, on the other hand, express their belief that they won't be able to help liberate Pokemon without some of their own, and so they accept the help of a Ralts and a Goth-Eater who approach them. Anthea and Concordia put their companions in Pokeballs, and advise A to pick at least one of his friends to accompany him. The king shakes his head and says it wouldn't be fair to the others. Knowing he truly won't budge, the more practically minded Anthea leads them to the secret passage that will take them from their underground castle to the outside world. A, still being Ash at his core, runs ahead, saying hello to every Woobat and Zubat he sees, while Anthea and Concordia just try their best to keep up. Eventually, they reach the surface, and there is a comedic moment where A tries to hug every wild Pokemon he sees, until a Heatmore expresses its unhappiness by blasting him in the face with fire. Concordia laughs at these antics, and expresses how good it is to see A so full of life. The Plasma Trio then proceeds south along Route 10, reaching Opelucid City by nightfall. After the stillness of the castle, all 3 are quickly overwhelmed by the bright buzzing hive of activity that is Opelucid's nightlife. Marking the trio as tourists, it is not long before a shady salesman approaches them, and begins trying to hawk his overpriced wares. Anthea, and Concordia try to ignore him at first, until he offers them his last lucky Baneri's foot. At once, A is upon the man, gripping him by the shirt front despite being half his size. He angrily demands to know where he got the foot or else. The salesman tries to play coy, but this just earns him a hard slap from Concordia. Yelping in pain, he gives in and gives them the name of his supplier and his address, all the while protesting he's just an innocent businessman. A tells him that anyone who profits off Pokemon's suffering isn't innocent. He then heads to the listed address, while Anthea and Concordia stay behind to make sure the salesman doesn't flee or try to tip off his supplier. This leads A to a grungy little warehouse containing a sinister-looking man seated on a stained couch, and a Baneri in a cage, missing its left foot. The man is none too thrilled to have this kid busting in on his business, and sends out his Reuniclus to teach A a lesson. A prepares himself, not sure how he can rescue the Baneri without hurting Reuniclus. But before the young king can take any action, Reuniclus is hit hard by 2 slashing moves that knock it out cold. A fraction of a second later, a third slash hits the man, sending him toppling over the back of his couch. Then the Shadow Triad step out of the shadows, each with a poniard by their side. A is livid, saying that he told Ghetsis not to send them with him, but the Triad are unabashed as they state that their king was in danger, so they acted. A softens a bit at this, acknowledging they were just trying to help, but tells them not to follow him anymore. The Shadow Triad acquiesce to A's command and tell him they will return to the castle with the Sinister Man and the salesman to face Lord Ghetsis' judgment. A agrees, his attention already on trying to jimmy open the lock on Baneri's cage. While A works on this, 2 of the Triad pick up the dazed criminal under each arm, while the third finds Reuniclus's Pokeball and shatters it. They then depart at such breakneck speed that they appear to vanish. When the others are gone, A manages to open Baneri's cage. He gives the Pokemon a smile, but it recoils and scrambles away until its back is up against the wall of its cage. Baneri is clearly terrified of A, but he is undeterred and just takes a seat on the floor, telling Baneri to take all the time it needs, and when it's ready, he'll take it to Nurse Joy. Baneri seems unconvinced, so A begins to hum a sweet lullaby. He tells Baneri that he remembers this tune from when he was little, though he can't remember where it comes from, but it always makes him feel safe. Baneri calms down enough to listen, and so A opens up a bit more. He tells Baneri about his home and his dream of liberating all Pokemon. Eventually, Anthea and Concordia arrive and tell A they encountered the Shadow Triad, who took the sleazy salesman away, supposedly under his orders. He confirms this and points to Baneri's injury. The girls understand at once, knowing how A gets when Pokemon are abused. The pair sit beside A and add their smiles to his. This is the tipping point, and Baneri finally crawls out of its cage. A pulls off his vest and gently wraps Baneri in it, taking care not to touch its injured leg. When it is secured and safe, he picks it up and the group run to the Pokemon Center. At the Pokemon Center, A gives Baneri to Nurse Joy and explains the condition he found it in. Nurse Joy is visibly disturbed, but thanks to the trio for bringing Baneri to her, and promises to do everything in her power to help. Before she takes it away, A asks if he can come with them into the surgery suite as moral support for Baneri, but Joy says the best she can offer is for him to watch through the glass. A accepts this, and so he, Anthea, and Concordia watch on as Nurse Joy sets to work on Baneri. The surgery lasts late into the night, but the trio stay where they are, silently wishing for Baneri to be alright. When Nurse Joy finishes, she takes Baneri into a bed in the back and allows the trio to stay with it. Concordia takes her position at the foot of the bed, and Anthea stands in the doorway, while A sits at Baneri's side, holding its paw while it sleeps, and continuing to hum the lullaby until it wakes up. The next morning, Joy returns, and says she has crafted a prosthesis for Baneri, but it will take a lot of rehabilitative work to get Baneri used to its prosthetic foot. A confidently states that he is sure Baneri can do it, and Nurse Joy says she's glad he thinks that, because she would like him to be the one to work with Baneri. A looks to Baneri, and asks if it wants to come with him. Baneri responds with a resounding yes, when it crawls up and hugs him. Anthea gives her brother a Pokeball to seal the deal, and he gently brushes it against Baneri's head, causing it to transform into red light and enter the ball. Immediately, he brings Baneri out and welcomes it to his team, as Nurse Joy fits the prosthetic foot. When this is done, A offers Baneri his hand, and together they take a few tentative steps. Baneri is delighted by this progress, jumping into the air, but due to its unfamiliar footing, it doesn't quite stick the landing and falls over. A picks it up and gives it a hug to show how proud he is of its resilience. He then attempts to return it to its ball so it can get some more rest, but Baneri immediately crawls back under the covers when it sees the Pokeball. A looks confused and asks what he's done wrong, to which Concordia points out that Baneri underwent a traumatic experience in that cage, and maybe it's afraid of being confined to small spaces like a Pokeball. A says she's probably right, and so offers Baneri his arm, saying it can ride on his shoulder if that would make it more comfortable. Baneri accepts this and is soon seated rather happily on A's left shoulder. With this new friend by their side, the trio head along Route 9. They later pass across Tube Line Bridge, with A and Baneri stopping to marvel at such a large structure, before finally reaching Route 8 and eventually Icera's city. Here they are greeted by a plasma grunt in disguise. She takes them to a little cottage on the edge of town, where Colress and his retainers have been staying. When they meet the man himself, his reception is just as chilly as the city's namesake. He expresses his disgust that first Ghetsis took Project G away from him, giving it to that hack Dudley of all people, so that he could assist that mute creep Nat dig through some ruin. But now he's seemingly fallen even further. As he's supposed to be a babysitter to these three? Concordia looks offended, and Anthea scowls at this tactless man, but A laughs to the surprise of everyone. He tells Colress how refreshing it is to be spoken to like a person, rather than the bowing and scraping everyone does because he's king. Colress in turn can respect that Ash isn't some pretentious brat, and even comments that if this is how the young king reacts to things, it will be very interesting to study him over the course of their travels. It seems as though it is time to move on and leave the city, but as the now completed team exit the cottage, they hear cheering from the heart of town. Heading to check it out, they find a man with a mask and a ponytail that is more blue than the rest of his baby blue hair. He is hosting some sort of press conference, with his audience eating up everything he has to say. When A asks who this is, Colress tells him that it's Bryson, the Icera City gym leader. Concordia chimes in that father told her about gym leaders. They're gatekeepers to the Pokemon League, who make a living by forcing their Pokemon to battle day in and day out against dozens of challenges each week. A cannot abide this systematic abuse and barges his way on stage. He calls Bryson a villain who needs to be taught a lesson. Since this press conference is for his new movie, Bryson Man, in which he plays a supervillain, Bryson assumes this kid must be a superfan, or maybe a child actor hired by the PR team, and so decides to play along with whatever this is. With a malicious cackle and a flick of his hair, Bryson claims that he is not just a villain, but the greatest villain in all of Unova. A takes this for confirmation of his accusations, and declares that he's going to put a stop to his evil ways right here, right now. The crowd seem to love this, and so do the television reporters, so Bryson decides to capitalize on this weird turn of events, and replies that to settle this they will have a battle, but not right now. When A asks why not, Bryson says he needs time to prepare his villainous lair, and that they will have their battle in exactly 1 week at the Icera's gym. A agrees and the crowd go wild of what they are sure will be a spectacle to remember. Reporters swarm Bryson, trying to get exclusive rights to broadcast the battle, while A turns his back on the people asking who he is, and whether Bryson himself hired him to put on this little skit. When A rejoins his friends, Colress wastes no time explaining that what just happened was not normal gym leader behavior, and that Bryson is an actor who must have thought their confrontation was a publicity stunt. A doesn't care, and says that Bryson can think whatever he wants. Since their battle is going to be televised, A will prove the legitimacy of his ideals for all of Unova to see, when he and Baneri cut this arrogant oppressor down to size. Anthea and Concordia applaud A for championing Team Plasma's philosophy, but Colress remarks it's a bit hypocritical to condemn gym leaders for making their Pokemon battle when A plans to do the same with his own Pokemon. A retorts that his Pokemon is here with him by choice, unlike most Pokemon who are enslaved against their will. Baneri pumps its fist in the air to signify its agreement with its trainer, and A asks if it wants to battle Bryson, to which it eagerly agrees. Colress says this is all well and good, but if this is A's only Pokemon, he might as well concede now. He goes on to add that maybe they'd have a chance if Baneri evolved, which makes Baneri's eyes swim with tears. A says that is enough, and pats Baneri's head, saying he loves it just the way it is, and he'll never force it or any other Pokemon to evolve. Colress rolls his eyes and says if that's the way A wants it, there might be another way to win. A asks how, and Colress says he has an idea on how to deal super effective damage to Bryson's ice types. Concordia adds that A should aim for super effective moves, since if they can knock the opponent's Pokemon out in one hit, they might not even be able to feel it and won't have to suffer. With this in mind, A tells Colress that he has his permission to enact whatever this plan is. Colress tells A he'll need to take Baneri's artificial foot away to tinker with it. However, this will take some time, so A and Baneri decide to use this time to keep working on Baneri's rehab. A and Baneri begin by continuing to work on hopping and jumping, having seen how Baneri fell over when it tried to jump for joy back at the Pokemon Center. To keep balance, Baneri holds both of A's hands, and A flings it into the air then catches it. Both trainer and Pokemon have immense fun with this, and their bond continues to deepen. Meanwhile, back at the Team Plasma cottage, Colress gets to work upgrading Baneri's foot. This catches the attention of Anthea, who comments that the scientist seems to be going above and beyond for someone who not so long ago he called a burden. She then begins to tease that maybe Colress has already developed a soft spot for their king. Colress denies this with a smirk, claiming he's only helping because it happens to coincide with his own goals of studying how to bring out a Pokemon's true strength. Anthea rolls her eyes and tells him he can rationalize his actions however he wants, but there's no shame in admitting he wants to help A out of the goodness of his heart. After all, he wouldn't be the first. Colress asks Anthea to explain, and she tells him that Ghetsis always said A has the aura of a hero, and that's why people in Pokemon flock to him and generally feel comfortable in his presence. Colress calls this nonsense and bemoans how he had actually hoped Anthea would be his source of intelligent conversation before she started spouting off about auras. Anthea shrugs this insult off and tells him to observe A's innate charisma for himself, with her assurance that he will be a believer before their journey is done. Colress accepts this proposition and tells Anthea to fetch the spare soldering mask from his room. If she's going to keep hanging around and bothering him, she might as well make herself useful and help improve this foot. Anthea blanches at being bossed around this way, but the grunt who originally brought them here whispers that it's Colress's attempt at a compliment, and that he normally never lets anyone help. Colress chimes in it's rude to talk about people like they can't hear you, especially when they're less than 5 feet away, and that stupidity like this is why he never allows any of the grunts to touch his work. Back at the park where A and Baneri are playing, they are approached by a silent figure, tall and gaunt with wild green hair and dead eyes. He makes for a chilling presence, but A is used to him by now and asks what Nat wants. Nat replies that he wants for nothing, wants it for those with lofty ideals, while he lives by simple truths taught to him by Lord Ghetsis. This philosophical discussion baffles A, who asks the more direct question of why Nat has approached him. Nat answers that he is here to battle. When A asks why, Nat answers that his function is to serve Ghetsis, and Ghetsis wishes A to succeed, so he, Nat, must help A succeed by battling him to make him stronger. A is unsure, but Baneri seems fired up after all their playing. A recognizes his friend's desire, and so agrees to a one-on-one match. Nat accepts these terms and meets Baneri with his Zoroark. The two Pokemon square up, then in a shock to everyone, Baneri does a one-legged leap, flying at Zoroark and hitting it squarely in the jaw with a pound. A congratulates Baneri, but Nat says the battle isn't over. When A calls for another pound, Nat tells Zoroark to counter with Fury Swipes. The moves clash over and over, and it seems like an even match, with neither being able to break through. But when Baneri begins pushing itself to its limits, Zoroark has no trouble matching Baneri's power without any sign of strain. In his usual monotone, Nat tells A that his Pokemon has reached its ceiling and is still inferior to Zoroark. He then proves this by telling Zoroark to use half its full strength. At once, Zoroark becomes a blur, slashing Baneri across the chest, then vanishing behind it to slam the normal type into the dirt. A rushes in to check on Baneri, while a dispassionate Nat tells Ash that he and his Pokemon will need more strength if they are to have a chance at defeating those who will stand against their ideals. He then vanishes in the style of the Shadow Triad, leaving the young king and his Pokemon alone. When evening falls and A has not returned to the cottage, his sisters and Colress venture to the park to see if he's okay. What they find is something they could hardly have expected. A is standing with his back to a tree, while Baneri leaps up and repeatedly pounds his chest and stomach as hard as it can. When the others ask what is going on, A explains that Baneri wanted to train after a battle with Nat's Zoroark. When he goes on to explain what happened, both Anthea and Concordia surmise that Baneri's fear of being helpless again must have given it a new drive to battle. Colress says this is good, since the pair will need a fighting spirit if they're going up against a gym leader. He does, however, have one more question aimed at A. Since there is a tree right behind him, why doesn't he have Baneri attack the tree rather than him? A answers that he wanted to help Baneri himself, so it was only right that he offer himself up as a training dummy. Chorus mutters he's not so sure about the training part, but this guy is definitely a dummy if he thinks getting himself beaten black and blue is a good idea. Before a fight can break out, Anthea and Concordia tell A it's time to come back to the cottage. It's getting late, and Chorus has to show him the special modification he's made to Baneri's foot. Both Trainer and Pokemon are excited by this, and so the group begin making their way home.